Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Thanks again for being here today. We still got about 4 minutes, and then we can get the meeting started. For now, though, welcome, and hope you're all having a nice morning. Oh, hey, Eddie. Hi there, Sebastian, Ivan, Sergio, Janice, Alexis, Jerry, Mia. Hey, everyone. Hey, Eddie. Hey, Katan. What's up? Huh? Eddie? Huh? He's figuring out the camera. Eddie? Good morning. It's just, I don't know, he's endlessly amusing to me. He's a good boy. Hi, Eddie. Good morning. Hey. Morning, Justin. Hi, Danielle, Jocelyn, Gloria, Allison. 1 second. Hello? Hey, how are you? Good. Mm-hmm. Okay. Sure, no problem. Yeah, just let me know if it's ready, then I can come after, anytime later today or tomorrow if that's better. Okay, sounds good then. Okay, thanks. Bye. It's just the people about my car that it's gonna be done today, so that's good news for me. I think I told you guys my car, someone broke into broken windows, so I had to get it replaced. I was able to take this call just with a few seconds before class time. I recognized the number, so I knew it was going to be the service technician guy. Okay. Eddie's funny. He will do this, he will stand like that, just for like an hour. I mean, I've never really seen it. Looks like he's actually trying to look at the stuff on the screen, live chat and everything else. Too funny. Okay, but welcome back everybody, and it's good to see you guys as usual. So here we are. It's pretty much now 10. Let me just get us gradually started here. Thanks again for being at the class meeting. This is the last day when we have lectures. Next week during the 2 class periods, it's all just going to be review for the final. And I'm going to send off the study guide for the final today, later on. So you'll get it in your inbox as a titanium announcement. And just like with the midterm, it's just going to be a list of study guide questions that you can review and that we will all talk about as much as we can next week. Next week we have 2 review sessions. For the midterm, there was just 1. So we'll have a little bit more time to go back over all the information again and get as clear as we can. But we do have this last lecture. We have 1 more class meeting today to go over just a little bit of new material, so I'm going to try and cover some of it. In the last meeting, we finally wrapped up the end of our philosophy of mind topic in this class, which has to do with consciousness. What's the underlying basis of consciousness? Is it just physical, or is it something more than physical? Is dualism true, or is physicalism true? Which brings us to the last topic of the semester. Ideally, if we had if the pace and flow of some of the lectures were a little quicker, we might have had just 2 meetings on this or 3, but we'll do our best today. So the little mini topic that we're just going to kind of touch on briefly today is the issue of life and death. So what would make a human being's life go well is the question. You know, we all are human beings living a life, one life at least, your life, my life. Each one of us is living our own lives. And when it comes to life and the life you're living, I think probably everyone can agree you want your life to go well. Don't you want it to go well? I mean, most people wouldn't say, hey, going well, not going well, or in between. It really doesn't matter. Most people think, if I had to pick, I would want my life to go as well as it possibly could. But what does it mean for a human life to go well? Is there any kind of objective or coherent, rational thing to say about that? Or is it just everybody has a different opinion on it and there's no sort of one-size-fits-all approach? Well, as with many other things, as you guys see in philosophy, philosophers are sort of here to help and to try and give us some options to think about. So there have been written accounts throughout history in the world of philosophy about what would make a human life go well. And we're going to try and at least examine one of the big, important, influential accounts of that comes from ancient Greece and the writings of Plato. If we have enough time at the end, maybe I'll be able to quickly compare his view about what makes a human life go well to a more modern perspective on it, which comes from the 20th century philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. So anyway, let's try and do the first installment of that at least, which is to talk about the best human life, how to live your best life according to Plato. Okay, so we're going back in time again, over 2,000 years to the world of ancient Greece, and we're going to learn more from Plato. He was born in 428 BC, and he lived until 347 before the Common Era. So, you know, like roughly 400 years before the life and the events of Jesus Christ in the early Christian era. He wrote a big book that's widely considered one of the all-time. So Plato's classic work, probably his most well-known work, is called The Republic. The Republic, or oftentimes Plato's Republic, as they call it. Plato's Republic makes this long description of what would be the ideal human society. So like, what would it take for an ideal human society to exist? What would be the ingredients or the blueprint for the perfect utopian form of human government or state? Now, this is a kind of style or a genre of writing that has been attempted by a few other writers in history. Thomas More, the British essayist, wrote the book called Utopia, More's Utopia, which has a different kind of view about what would make for the ideal human society. But Plato has an account of this as well, which is written in the Republic. Now, for you to know what Plato thought would make the best individual human life, we have to build a bridge to that from his account of what is the best ideal human society. Because as I'm going to teach you, Plato believes that there are significant similarities between the best society, the Republic, and then the best individual human life for an individual. Plato argues that there's a basic three-part division of the Republic. So there's like 3 different classes that people can join into in the Republic. And he thinks that there's also a 3-way division of parts of the human soul. And he thinks that they're kind of a mirror of each other. So the soul of a human individual is kind of like a microcosm of the state. And that's why he says you should base the way of living your best life on the way that the best society would be organized. So there's kind of like this parallelism between the form of the best republic and the form of the best individual life. So we'll start then with his description of what is the republic and what makes it this ideal society according to him anyway. Now, the dialogue that we're reading in the book comes from the Republic, but as with other things in our textbook, they just take a section from it, the original Republic, and then they retitle this shorter section that they've kind of placed as an extract in the book. In the book, they call it On the Harmony of the Soul. So I'm just going to write that so that you're aware of the connection between the original work of Plato and then the retitled version of a section of it in our book, On the Harmony of the Soul. Okay, so here is the first major item today to fully break down and analyze this writing of Plato's called On the Harmony of the Soul, which is out of his book, The Republic. Okay, so then, to get started, I have to tell you all about what Plato says are the three main parts of the Republic. Three main parts of the Republic. So these, as I say, were the three categories into which people can be placed. So, three main parts of the Republic. That's the header. Okay, so one part is the class of people that he calls the merchants. Okay. Now, who are the merchants? I'm going to keep it there and just moving it to the left a little so I have a little more room on to the right. Merchants. Okay, so merchants, what they are all the people in society who simply just produce goods and services, which they then trade or sell for a profit. So all the people that are working businesses, trade crafts, and earning money for the sale or production of goods and services, they're merchants. Okay, so people who produce goods and services to sell for a profit. Merchants. So that's like he says this is the biggest category of the members of the Republic, meaning it has the most members, the most people in it. And if you want to sort of see it as parallel to the modern day kind of Western democracies that we're living in now, merchants would just be all those people that are, working people, owning and operating businesses of whatever scale, small, medium, large, selling whatever goods and services that they produce for profit. And so whether it's a person that owns a landscaping company, a car service, retail industries, when a person's producing, whether it's a service or a product, and then they sell it in the market for money, that's merchants. I've seen in some translations, because this was originally written in Greek, right? But I've seen some translations use the term artisan rather than merchant. I prefer merchant, though, even though they're supposed to mean the same thing, I guess. Because artisan could throw you off into thinking that those are supposed to literally be artists, making artwork or artifacts. But they're just merchants. So I like this because it avoids those false associations with like pure art. Okay, so merchants, one category of people in the Republic. Now another section in the Republic is what he calls the warriors. Okay, so warriors of the Republic. Now the warriors have a whole different function within the Republic. So these are the people who basically are the security forces. They provide security for the Republic. So they would defend it, they would fight for and defend the Republic against external threats or against internal instability. Like if, rioting or civil disorder broke out, then they would help to restore order. So they're the security forces. You can think of like the equivalent of our military members or police and National Guard and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, people who fight to defend the Republic against external threats like, invading armies or whatever, if that was the case, or attacks from without, and internal instability. Another possible need for security. Okay, so that's a different group in the Republic with a different task. I mean, people that are soldiers and military people are not selling you, a product that you want to buy for money, but instead they're providing for your defense or your security, and that's a necessary element of any society, so this is a second group. Now, the third group of people in the Republic is all important and really needs to be highlighted and emphasized because this is the leadership group. And so these are the kings, as he calls them, kings. And kings are like just the equivalent of our political leadership class. So this would be like the heads of state, presidents, prime ministers, monarchs, or congressional leaders if there are, congressional bodies like we have in Congress or Parliament. So these are people who preside over the republic, who set law and policy, and also who are in control of ordering the military or the security forces into action. So people who preside over the republic, they're the rulers. Set laws and policies and control the warriors. So you got the three divisions of the republic spelled out: merchants, warriors, kings. Now here's a little difference between, there are some parallels between the system of the republic and our modern day Western liberal democracy like what we're living in here in America, but there are also some real differences too. So one difference is this: as you guys know, in like contemporary American society and in other Western democracies too, you're given the freedom to kind of determine on your own which category you'd like to be a part of in society. And it's not like it's necessarily dictated to you based on what people think are your natural abilities. So in our society, right, say that somebody is like the biggest, toughest, brawny, strong, fit person. And that means that if they wanted to, they would be very, very good at providing for, security and defense. They would be an amazing soldier. I'm not too worried, but good to see you, Angel. Nice to be with you. So all I was just saying right there is, suppose that there is, like in today's society, somebody who's big, strong, tough, and they would be an amazing fighter. But they don't want to do that with their life. They'd rather just open a flower shop and sell, bouquets to people, and then that's what they do for a living. In our society, we say, fine, go ahead and do that. Even if you are really strong and tough, and you might be a better soldier, if you want to just be a merchant that, sells a product or service, that's fine. On the other hand, suppose in our society there's somebody who's really extremely intellectually gifted, a star student, and very, very wise intellectually. They might be an effective leader. You think this person would be a great political leader. They are making such good decisions. They are so good at long-range planning. But what if that same person in our society says, you know what, I don't care though. I just want to go and fight and, offer myself as a part of the military or army. So in our society, we give people the freedom to just go to whatever social station they want based on their interests and preferences. But in the republic, though, it's not like that. In the republic, people would be placed in the given category where their actual aptitudes best qualify them. And this would be determined through a sequence of rigorous testing and assessment at various stages throughout their educational process. So let me explain how that sorting people into the three divisions would work. Plato said, okay, so everyone's going to have like primary education, like, the equivalent of your K through 12 pretty much. And when people are really young, getting that early education, they're learning basic subjects like mathematics, art, gymnastics, physical education, music. And he said, when that whole thing is done and they complete their primary education, we make everybody take a big comprehensive examination, like a test. And this test is going to determine a lot, because suppose that you took this first big exam after you finished your primary education and you didn't pass. Well, if you don't pass that test, then the Republic says, boom, you're going to be a warrior. You're going to be a warrior because failure on this big test shows that you're not like the most intellectually gifted of all members of the Republic. People that were a little sharper and smarter in school would have passed it, but you didn't. So if you didn't pass there, the Republic thinks you can best offer support to the system by just being a soldier, a warrior. Suppose, though, that you passed that big test, okay? So you succeeded and you passed it. Now that means that you go on to a second tier of even higher education where there's more advanced subjects, a little bit more rigor and everything. Now suppose that at the end of that secondary course of education that you've now completed, you're going to take a second exam, a second one that's a little more advanced than the initial one was before. And once again, there's two outcomes that could happen. People could pass this second exam or they could fail it. Now, suppose that people surpass the standard of the second big exam. Well, let me go into the failure case first. Sorry. Suppose that people fail the second exam, even though they did pass the first one. Well, in that case, they're relegated to the merchant class. So, meaning that they weren't the absolute, least intellectually capable, because they did pass at least one of these major exams. But since they failed at the second hurdle, they're not going to be considered the absolute best and brightest that the Republic has to offer. So they'll use whatever intellectual talents and skills that they've accumulated along the way to be good merchants that produce goods and services for profit. But suppose that you did pass that second exam also. Now you get placed into an even higher course of third-tier education that goes on well into your middle-age adult life. But when that is all completed, now you just enter the ranks of the kings. And so how is political leadership achieved in the Republic? It's not done because of democratic elections. And Plato is very, very pointed on that. He makes clear that he is suspicious of the sustainability of democracy. He thinks it's not an ideal form of government. And the reason he thinks that is exactly because he says that in a democracy, as you know, a person assumes political power by winning a majority in an election. But he says that leaves room for a tyrant to emerge. If a tyrant could somehow appeal to a majority of the voting population with appeals to populism or nativism or something, then this person can control the democracy and then turn it into a tyranny. Eventually, then, we live under tyranny because late-stage democracy falls to a tyrant. And then he says, well, when we're living under tyranny, that goes on for a while, but after a while, people don't like tyranny, so powerful members of the society rise up to overthrow the tyrant, and then now we have these oligarchs that have replaced the tyrant. So we live under oligarchy for a while. And he says at the end of oligarchy, people put pressure on the oligarchs to return power to the people, and then they restore democracy, which lasts for a while until a new tyrant emerges. And it keeps on going on through this perpetual cycle. That's what Plato thought. You would have tyranny, you would have democracy leading to tyranny, leading to oligarchy, and over again to no end. And so he thought the only way to get off of this revolving door of not ideal governments was to establish and institute the Republic, where power is achieved through proven intellectual excellence and not just being the most popular person in society. So he was very much not a fan of democracy, and that's a major difference between features of the Republic and our own society. Okay, so these three parts of the Republic were the three sections that Plato thought people should be divided into according to their measured aptitude in this series of rigorous exams that occur throughout their educational process. Now, the next thing to talk about is that Plato says that each of these three parts of the Republic, if it's going to do its job at the highest level, if this is going to be the best merchant class, the best warrior class, the best class of kings, then each one of them should exhibit a virtue which is distinctive of that group. Now, about the word virtue, how is it used? What does it mean in the Greek thought? Here's what they consider the word virtue to mean. So, virtue is simply a word that means this. It's an attribute that something has when it's able to perform its function very, very well. Okay, so an attribute that something has when it is able to perform its function, when it's able to perform its function excellently well, very well. Okay, so if you can't read it, I hope you can, but what it says is virtue, an attribute that something has when it is able to perform its function excellently well. Okay, so let me help you think about that with a quick example. So first you got to think about what the function of a thing is, and then ask yourself what quality would that thing need to have if it was able to do that thing very, very well. So like, in other words, what feature does something need to have to do its thing at a high level? Now, to use an example that's easy, let's go with the case of a kitchen knife. Okay, so what's the function of a kitchen knife? Well, it's to cut things like food, vegetables, meat, whatever, to prepare food. So that's the function of a knife, clearly, to cut. So who could tell me then what's the virtue of a knife? If it's a good knife that can do its thing very well, if it's an excellent knife that's good at cutting, then what attribute will it have? The attribute I'm talking about, someone will say, the virtue of a good knife is to be blank. Correct, sharpness, exactly. So when you have a sharp knife, you have a well-functioning knife because sharp knives cut easily. If they're not sharp, if they're dull, then they don't cut as well as the sharp one does. So to be sharp is the virtue that is unique to a knife. So then, with that clear, I'm going to erase that because I need some space. But what we're now going to describe is what Plato thinks is the virtue of each of the three parts of the Republic. Okay, so he thinks that there's a quality that when the merchants have it, they're going to be excellent merchants. And there's a quality that when the warriors have it, they're going to be excellent warriors. And also a quality that if the kings who are the leaders have it, then they would be very good and effective kings. So let's go over each one. The virtue of the merchant class, so I'll just put it up here as like virtue, is temperance. The virtue of the warrior class is courage. And the virtue of the king class is wisdom. Okay, so let me go through each of those three virtues, make sure that you understand them and how they relate to that part of the Republic. So the virtue of temperance, since I have a shortage of room there, I'm going to type in the chat the definition that you need. So hold on. Okay, so temperance is this. It is having moderation and self-control over your desires and appetites. Temperance, having moderation and self-control over your desires and appetites. So it's basically like being able to control your desires, not letting them get the best of you or being too greedy. So all of us have desires for things, right? Like you want money, you want experiences, you want certain possessions maybe, and until you get them, you keep trying to work to get them. Like right now you have a desire to graduate college and you're working on that fulfilled desire too. So merchants are people who are producing goods and services to profit off of it. They're trying to make money. So they have a desire for the increase in wealth and profit that comes from the sale of their goods. But if they're going to be good merchants that serve the Republic well, then they shouldn't be too greedy with it, right? They shouldn't be so greedy and so desirous of wealth that they end up, for example, inflating the price of their goods or selling inferior products at an inflated cost. If they end up doing this, then they become rampant with fraud, mismanagement, and just dishonest business practices, which ends up harming the health of the society as a whole. You know, so to avoid having out of control, predatory business people with poor practices, we need to have these merchants with some degree of self-control and moderation so they don't go overboard with greed. Now, it's a fine thing for these merchants to profit. That's in fact their whole, function. But they should do so in a way that maintains basic standards of honesty and fairness. And they won't do that if they don't have temperance. So you got to have a little bit of moderation and self-control to be a good merchant. Otherwise, you're going to end up being a con artist or a fraud and ripping people off. Now, next, warriors. These are the fighters. These are the soldiers, the police, the ones that have to provide for defense. And the virtue they should have is courage. Now let me define that in the chat as well, even though it's more of a common sense idea, but let's make it clear. Courage being willing and able to face danger when it is right and necessary. Okay, so courage, that's, as you see there in the chat, the willingness, the ability to face danger when it's right and necessary. If you're courageous, it's kind of like being brave, same thing. It means that you can face a risky situation that might put you in harm's way, but you're willing to do that if it's the right thing to do and if it's necessary to do it. So how can we have really good fighting soldiers or police officers if they're living in fear of danger all the time? I mean, if you're a soldier, part of the job description is you're going to be facing danger because you're trying to provide security against dangerous things. So you're like standing in between the republic and threats to it. So you're like this line of defense. Therefore, you have to be willing to face at least some degree of danger. If we have scared, cowardly fighting forces, then they're going to shrink away from the sign of danger instead of running towards it. You call the police to stop a shooter. If they're afraid, they're not even going to get out of the squad car to go in and try and defuse the situation. So being willing and able to face some level of risk is a requirement of being a capable and effective fighting warrior. So we need them to have that level of courage to be good at their job. Next, the kings. Now, for kings who run the whole show and preside over everything and rule, they need to have wisdom. And wisdom is, basically just intelligence. But let's try and make it a little more specific, I guess. Wisdom. So I say the ability to make careful decisions and long-range plans based on proper analysis. This is wisdom. A wise person doesn't choose things impulsively based on like powerful emotions or overpowering impulses of greed. They weigh all relevant factors. They look at the long range and they try and make the reasonable decision for everybody. So if we didn't have kings that were wise, if we had idiotic, imbecilic, stupid people running the government, then not only could they not lead their own life, much less the society of the republic. So a bad, unwise, short-sighted, narrow-minded king would lead the republic into its own self-destruction by making a series of poor decisions and choices that undermine its overall integrity and health. So anyway then, what's a good republic? A good republic is one where each of the three parts is doing its own work according to its virtue, and in which all of them rightfully submit to the rule of the king. That means that there has to be harmony among all these parts. They have to cooperate with each other. There should not be any challenge or competition from the inferior parts of the republic to overthrow the kings. So like if the warriors, for example, tried to seize power from the kings like in a military coup, this would be a society that is in disequilibrium and that's falling apart. It's a disorganized and poorly ordered society. And if the warriors did succeed in toppling the kings, then they wouldn't be fit to rule because they don't have the wisdom that's necessary to make the right leadership decisions. Similarly, if the merchants somehow tried to subvert the rule of the kings or shape the business practices of the republic to favor them and to disadvantage others, then that would also lead to the financial corruption and eventual destruction of the republic too. So anyway, these other parts of the republic, they have important jobs to do, but they're not the kings. And so they should not ever try to usurp the power or leadership role over those kings. So it's important, he says, for each of the three parts to basically stay in their own lane and don't try to interfere with the work of the other parts. Let the kings rule, let the warriors fight, and let the merchants make goods and services for a profit with proper regulation, but don't have any of them overstepping their own boundaries and trying to do the work of others. And importantly, all should be obediently deferential to the rule of these wise kings. In fact, when you talk about the kings, this is a little side note, but it's something that's often mentioned in Platonic writing. He says the kings should be called philosopher kings. Isn't that kind of nice? As a philosopher, I think I appreciate the compliment. But what he says is that they're called philosopher kings because philosophers are the wisest of all people. So the kind of people that are going to surpass all those tests and actually end up in this position would be the wisest few, the philosophers among us. So I guess he thinks that in a perfect world, people like me, I guess, would be running society. I don't know, because we're so careful, detail-oriented, and well aware of a variety of complex arguments and logical practices and procedures. But I digress. So there you go. That would be your ideal republic. Now, I said to you that this is an account that he gives, not just about the ideal state, but also about the best human life that you could live as an individual. And so what we're going to do next is fill in the gaps as to how he thinks this whole picture applies to the individual. He does think it applies. He says that the individual human has a soul, which is also divided into 3 parts. And the 3 parts of the human soul have some basic similarities that are roughly parallel to the 3 parts of the republic. So now I'm going to clear the whole board. And the next thing we'll talk about are what he thinks the 3 parts of the human soul. Okay, so let's do that. You know, there's all kinds of like, I mean, the Republic is a big book. It's something that you could spend like a whole semester really reading if you wanted to go into all the little details. But there's all kinds of other interesting little details in it. Like I talked to you about how he wants to have the kings appointed to power through merit based on their performance on these tests throughout their education. He also had other kind of rules that were supposed to prevent anyone that became a king from being corrupt. In fact, it was supposed to be that those that became kings were not allowed to have children or family. And that was supposed to ensure that no one was doing it so that they could somehow establish a legacy, like have their children, you know, take on power after them. And it was also made sure that those that are in the role of king were not allowed to accumulate massive wealth, which ensures that people are not motivated to become kings just to somehow bend the rules of society to their own self-interest and advantage. So if you were worried about the possibility of corruption in a society where there's not democratic rules to unseat the king, these were supposed to be some of the things that were in place to block that. Like, why would a person want to do it except for just wanting to be a good ruler if they knew that they could not get rich from it, or they knew that they could not like have children that they could pass on all this kind of privilege to? Okay, but let's go back into the 3 parts of the human soul. Just like there's 3 parts to the Republic, Plato thought there were 3 parts to the soul. And here let's go over what they each were. So one of the 3 parts he called the appetitive part. Appetitive part of your soul. And this appetitive part is the part of you that has desires for things. So I'll just put it this way, has desires and appetites that want to be fulfilled. Okay, so think about your soul, I guess, as having different compartments. And one of them he calls the appetitive. Now, what is that? That is the part of you, I guess, that has desires for things, appetites for things, as the word indicates. What could be a desire or an appetite a thing for? Well, it could be for almost anything, right? Sometimes it's for possessions. Sometimes it's for experiences. Sometimes it's for certain kinds of relationships. Sometimes it's literally for food. You know, if you have an appetite, if you have a desire for like tacos or something, and then you go get them, you can say, I fulfilled my desire for that. But it's much more broad than like literally food. Don't think of appetites too literally. Like I could say I have a desire right now to have a PlayStation 5, and I do have a desire for that. I'm hoping to fulfill this desire over the summer when I have more free time and then actually buy it and own it. Right now, it's something I want, I don't yet have. When I get it, then I'll fulfill the desire for it. Okay, so desires are just things that you want. And that can cover a big, broad category. Some of you guys, I think, right now have a desire to graduate college, so you're working towards that fulfilled goal. Some people want to get married, have children, travel the world, go to certain destinations. And if these are things that you desire to do, then you're driven to fulfill those desires, and that's a big part of life. So the appetitive part of you is the part that wants things, that wants those things and hopes to someday fulfill them, whatever they may be, large or small or in between. Now, Another part of your soul, according to the Republic, is what he calls the spirited part. So the spirited part of you is kind of like the fighter within you, the competitor within you, the one that likes to display skill and ability. So it's a passionate, proud part of you that loves to win, hates to lose. It's very competitive. So passionate, proud, competitive, loves to win, hates to lose, etc. Okay, so that would be the part of you, the spirited part of you, that, like, say you were a member of a sports team and you really have that desire to come out victorious and to show your abilities on the field or whatever. The spirited part of you would be activated right there. Or it would be the part of you that would be willing to stand up and fight to either defend yourself or important values that you care about or other people that you care about. It would be the part of you that hates to be slighted or disrespected or dishonored and that craves recognition, honor, and respect. So that's the spirited part. And then we have one more, which is the rational part of you, okay? Since it's a little far to the right, I think I'll just type the description below of the rational part of the soul. Okay, rational part of the soul makes calm and reasonable decisions based on evidence. So the decision maker within you, the intellect part, the part that's not driven by passion or pride, nor greed or desire, but just intellect and reasonable common sense. So it would be the part of you that would sometimes overcome the impulses that the lower parts of the soul have. So sometimes if the rational part presides over everything, it will say you should probably wait on fulfilling that desire because it's not going to be healthy or good for you to do it now. Or maybe you should not act on this feeling of spirited pride and passion, even though in the moment it feels like it would be satisfying. So your rational part is sometimes going to make a calmer, more deliberate decision based on all the available evidence, and it thinks in the long term. So if you had to guess, let me ask you, which of the three parts of the Republic do you think each one corresponds to? So let's start here with the appetitive part of the soul. I try to make it easy for you, even visually, but let's see if you can figure this. The appetitive part, the one that wants stuff, it's always seeking out its desires to be fulfilled. Which of our three parts of the Republic do you think that is supposed to match with? Appetitive? Correct. It goes with the merchants, because the combination, or the connection between the two is that merchants also are trying to seek out and desire profit and the accumulation of wealth. So because lying at the heart of their function within the Republic is the pursuit of something, more money, more wealth, then they kind of represent, or could be seen in a way parallel to the appetitive part, which is also always seeking the fulfillment of more and more desires that you have. Now the spirited part, the part that's passionate, proud, doesn't want to be disrespected, is willing to fight. This is going to serve as a stand-in for which part of the Republic? So we've set aside the merchants. That's correct. Again, Kobe, yeah. The spirited part of you is sort of like the soldiers if you were going to match it to one part of the Republic. It's the fighting part of you. It's the part that's ready to go, to compete. It doesn't want any disrespect. Now, the rational part of you, they'll make calm decisions, weigh all the evidence, and make a long-range decision, not just the heat of the moment impulsive choice. This is supposed to be like the kings that preside over everything and have the executive power to make all the final calls. Now, in the same way as we said that the three parts of the Republic would have a virtue when they're doing their job very well, he also thinks that there will be a virtue for each part of your soul. And this is, I guess, convenient because the virtue of the three parts of the soul are exactly the same as in the corresponding part of the Republic. So the virtue of each of these three parts is, once again, To have your appetitive part in control and working well, it should have temperance, moderation. To have the spirited part of you doing its job at the highest level, it should have courage. And to have the rational part of you doing its job at the best level, it should be wise and have wisdom. Okay, so you ready for this? How do you live your best life then according to Plato? Well, you got to try and get your soul in the same configuration as the Republic is. So which part of your soul should be ruling and running everything? It should be the rational part of you. You need to empower your reason and your intellect so that it has the strongest voice and that it asserts authority over everything else. You need to try and make sure that your spirited nature, your competitive, proud, passionate part, is willing to display courage and willing to face danger or risks at certain times when that reason of yours tells you that it's right and necessary to do it. And the appetitive part of you that's always seeking out the fulfillment of whatever desires you have should be able to curb those desires at times and show some degree of moderation and restraint and self-control. Otherwise, it'll lead you into a series of poorly considered, rash decisions as you pursue your pleasures and desires without considering whether it's reasonable. So to live your best life, make sure your appetitive nature has temperance, your spirited nature has courage, and your rational nature has wisdom. Also, as he said before, do not allow the parts of the soul to overstep their boundaries and try to do the work of other parts. So don't allow your desires to control your decisions. Don't allow your passions to overwhelm your better judgment. If you allow your reason to rule and to overrule at times the unwise, impulsive thoughts and decisions of the lower parts of the soul, now you're going to be living a good human life that's just and you won't behave badly. So try to get your reason to run everything, empower it, and make sure that it exerts authority and guidance over your desires and your passions. Let me then read from the book, and now we can see how he puts all this in the Republic itself. Here's who's talking in this passage. As you guys know, in most of the Platonic writings, Plato uses Socrates as the character that is the speaker. And in this dialogue, we have that again, where Socrates is talking, and he's talking actually to Plato's older brother, whose name was Glaucon. So this is Plato's brother, older brother, Glaucon, and Socrates, just having a talk about what makes the best life and how it compares to the best city, the Republic. So here's what they say. Socrates says, isn't the individual courageous in the same way and in the same part of himself as the city? That's right. And isn't everything else that has to do with virtue the same in both? Glaucon says, necessarily. And then he says, I suppose we'll say that a man is just in the same way as a city. Glaucon says, yes. Socrates then adds, and we surely have not forgotten that the city was just because each of the three classes in it was doing its own work. Glaucon says, agreed. Socrates then says, so we must also remember that each one of us, in whom each part is doing its own work, will himself be just and do his own. Glaucon says, of course we must. And now we get some more details from Socrates. He says, therefore, isn't it appropriate for the rational part to rule, since it is really wise and exercises foresight on behalf of the whole soul, and for the spirited part to obey it and be its ally? And isn't it, as we were saying, a mixture of music and poetry on the one hand and physical training on the other that makes the two parts harmonious, stretching and nurturing the rational part with fine words and learning, relaxing the other part through soothing stories and making it gentle by means of harmony and rhythm? And these two, having been nurtured in this way and having truly learned their own roles and been educated in them, will govern the appetitive part, which is the largest part in each person's soul and is by nature most insatiable for money. They'll watch over it to see that it is not filled with the so-called pleasures of the body and that it does not become so big and strong that it no longer does its own work, but attempts to enslave and rule the other classes that it's not fit to rule, thereby ruining everyone's life. Glaucon says, that's right. Socrates continues. He says, then wouldn't these two parts also do the finest job of guarding the whole soul and body against external enemies? Reason by planning, spirit by fighting, following its leader, and carrying out the leader's decisions through courage. And he says, yes, that's true. And then Socrates says, and it is because of the spirited part, I suppose, that we call a single individual courageous, namely, when it preserves through pain and pleasure the declarations of reason about what is to be feared and what is not. And we will call him wise because of that small part of himself that rules within him and makes those declarations and has within it the knowledge of what is advantageous for each part and for the whole soul. And isn't he moderate because of the friendly and harmonious relations between these same parts? Namely, when the ruler and the ruled believe in common that the rational part should rule, and they do not engage in civil war against it. And a person will be just because of what we have so often mentioned, and in that way. Okay, so if you want to live your best life, Plato's talking to you from thousands of years ago, and he says to you, living today, try to empower your reason and allow it to preside over all of your choices. Allow it to be the ruler, the king within you that asserts executive authority. But the other parts of the soul have important tasks to do as well. But their tasks should be limited to the role that they play in your soul. So like your appetitive nature should seek out the things that it wants to fulfill, but do so with moderation and self-constraint. And the spirited part of you that has so much passion that it's ready to go and fight, it should not be like, it should act according to the counsel of wisdom and do so with courage. And the wisdom should be the feature seen in the rational part of you that allows it all to work together. He says that when you are like this, when you achieve this balance and harmony among the parts of your soul, then you're living your best life and your life is going well, and you're a microcosm in that case of the republic. So it's like you're a well-ordered society in miniature. But when you do things that are bad and that are wicked and unjust and vicious, he says that always happens because of an imbalance and a disharmony in the parts of the soul. Or it happens because one of the inferior lower parts of the soul, one of these two, has overstepped its boundaries and has taken control of your decisions. So let me try and go through a couple of examples that might show what he's talking about. Let me ask you about this. So say that somebody, they commit theft. Like, what if somebody hypothetically broke into somebody's car and stole their nice guitar? God, can you believe that? What if that happened? Anyway, theft, it can happen, as we know. So if somebody did it, though, according to Plato's breakdown, as we're looking at it, which part of their soul would be getting too overactive and taking too much control? To commit theft, it's like you have an out of control what part of your soul? Let me know about that. What would be your best answer? You got these three choices. So if you're going to steal things, yes, your appetites are out of control and they need to be curbed and checked by your reason. Okay, so like reason would tell you, no, it's not wise or rational to steal, because what you need to do is be patient enough to delay the gratification of having the item until you have sufficient money to pay for it. So your appetites dominate you when you commit theft. Nobody says, I studied the issue and I considered it long and hard and with real reason and patience, and I determined that just it's logical for me to steal. It's always a short-sighted, impulsive decision, like, I want it, I need it, I'm going to have it now. I know that I could wait longer, but I'm just going to try and take it and steal it at this moment. So theft is not virtuous, it's vicious, and theft proceeds from an imbalance according to which your appetitive nature is now in control. And that's bad. How about another example, okay? So suppose that someone cut you off on the road while you're driving somewhere. And, it was not nice. Maybe it made you feel like they put you at risk a little bit in the way that they approached your car a little too close on the pass. Maybe they didn't use their signals and things. So, it's a frustrating, annoying thing to you, but it puts you in a rage. Suppose you're now in this full road rage. So you're flashing the high beams at the person, riding behind them like really close, tailgating, honking your horn, revving the engine, scaring them. And then suppose that finally, you kind of run them off until they park somewhere, and you park behind them, get out of your car, start berating them, and you just beat this person senseless because they cut you off. What are you doing? You shouldn't do that to me. You don't never cut me off, blah, 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 beating them down. Okay, you heard that example. Unfortunately, these things happen too. And that's not a good way to act. But let me ask, if somebody really did that, as sometimes they do, which part of their soul, based on the Greek analysis, is getting too dominant and it needs to be checked by one of the other parts? Now we see a person who's out of control with rage. So we're looking at which part getting too powerful? The spirited part. That's right, Kobe. This is the person's thinking that don't disrespect me. I can't suffer the indignity or the disrespect of being cut off on the road like I'm just a common person and that doesn't matter. You're not going to do that to me. I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'm going to, impose upon you that, I have a greater degree of dignity that has to be respected than that. So the passion and the pride that the person had and the dislike of disrespect and dishonor is compelling them to make a rash decision to commit a violent act. Now, if you had thought about it and calmed down and you'd allow your reason to exert its control, it would say, I know you're upset, but it's not best for you or anybody else for you to follow through on an act like that. So again, bad behavior that is regrettable, that does not even tend to your own advantage, is going to come from the inferior parts of the soul exhibiting more power than they're supposed to have, because your reason is supposed to be the thing that makes all the final decisions, and that should be able to overrule the occasionally irrational desires or passions of the other parts. Now, let me read then, and this is the way that he puts the same kind of stuff. He says, for example, if we had come to an agreement about whether someone similar in nature and training to the city had embezzled a deposit of gold or silver, who do you think would consider him to have done it, rather than someone who is not like him? And Glaucon says, no one. The question he asked is, if somebody stole gold or silver, would anybody think that they had the same balanced harmony of the soul that the Republic has? And Glaucon says, nobody would think that, because to commit theft, it must be that your appetites are out of control. And then he says, would he have anything to do with temple robberies, thefts, betrayals of friends in private life, or cities in public life? Glaucon says, no, nothing. And he says, would he ever be untrustworthy in keeping an oath or an agreement? Glaucon says, how could he be? And adultery, disrespect for parents, neglect of the gods, that would be more in keeping with every other kind of person than him. And Glaucon says, with everyone. And he says, and isn't the cause of all this that every part within him is doing its own work, whether it is ruling or being ruled? Yes, and nothing else. Then are you still looking for justice to be something other than this, the one that produces men and cities of the sort that we've described? Glaucon says, nope, I'm certainly not. And then Socrates says, well, then the dream we had has been completely fulfilled. Our suspicion that with the help of God, we had hit upon the origin and pattern of justice right at the beginning of founding our city. And so he gets him to agree to all this. Now, there's one last important aspect, though, of the writing that we have to kind of talk about briefly. And after that entire description of what makes the best life, get your soul in harmony, allow the parts to all defer to the reason that you have, a question then is asked by Socrates to Glaucon in the dialogue. So Socrates says, hey, Glaucon, I got one more question. What about if someone could do all kinds of unjust things and just never get caught, that no one would ever know about it? And so he asks Glaucon, could injustice benefit somebody who is never detected doing anything unjust? You understand the question? So think about it like this. What if a person could cheat on all their tests and get a bunch of A's and they would never ever get caught by the teacher? Would that be to their advantage? Or what if somebody could cheat on their partner in a marriage or something and the partner would never learn about it? Would that be to their advantage? Would that benefit them? So, what if a person could commit financial crimes or something and they would never ever be found out? Would that benefit them? So you understand the question, what if you could do unjust things, never get caught? Would it be to your advantage? And some of you may be sitting and thinking, sure, why not? It isn't the only kind of cost the penalty? If someone catches me, sure, then I don't want to get punished. But if you're just stipulating that I wouldn't get punished, why not? Why couldn't it help me? But I don't suppose it's a big surprise to learn that from the Greek perspective, from Socrates and the Platonic view, no, you don't benefit from injustice, even if and when nobody will ever know about it. You still don't benefit. So don't think that getting away with it means that you're better off. Committing the injustice itself is going to harm you directly, whether or not it's ever noticed by anyone else. There was an old Greek myth about something called the Ring of Gyges that is sometimes mentioned by these Greeks in the writings. And it's something that's relevant to this, because in the myth, if you could ever find the ring, the mythical ring you would put on and it would make you invisible. So you can imagine that if this was a real thing, which of course it isn't, but if the myth was true, then wearing the ring would mean you could do all kinds of things and not worry about getting caught, right? So you could be in places that you're not authorized to be, or you could eavesdrop, or you could easily steal, of course, because no one could see the invisible thief. So anyway, whether you think about it through that example or just in general, the question remains, could unjust behavior benefit you so long as nobody catches you and you never get caught? Well, Socrates says no. And to explain why he thinks no, there's one more example that we got to speak on. So it's kind of like an odd example, just to be fair, but it's nothing new by now as we're getting to the end of the semester. So it's an example of a three-headed creature. Let me try to draw it and explain some of the basic features of this. Okay, three-headed creature there. So, as you know, I'm not amazing at drawing stuff in the first place, so just bear with me. But here's the body, let's say. All right. Now here's the different heads. Over here, it's kind of oddly described as like a section of heads where there's a bunch of little snapping gargoyles there. Okay, so like that's the section, and then you see these things that I'm drawing that are like circles on stems. Let's just say that those are a bunch of little snapping gargoyle head things. And I'm putting exclamation points because what they're all doing is just constantly wanting to eat. They're like, feed me, snap, 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 bite, 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 feed me, food, food. Okay, so a bunch of gargoyle heads in this section. Over here, we have the head of like a lion, you know, a lion like the noble king of the jungle, proud, noble lion. So, okay. Okay, I'm trying to make it, you know, the big, tough lion. It's not an amazing drawing of a lion, but, you know, work with it. And then in the middle, we have one more, which is just the head of like a normal-looking human being, like near you. Okay, so that's just regular. So now, he says this. Even though there's these three heads on the creature, I want you to imagine that only one of them is shown to everybody who looks at them. So like to all outside appearances, they just see the one that looks normal and typical. So let me ask you to guess. When other people look on to this so-called creature, they just see which head or face. They don't see anything too shocking, so maybe this is a big hint. To outsiders, to all appearances, this just looks to be like a what? So three heads are there, but to the observer, we only see the human one. That is correct, the human-looking head. So if you just looked at this person, you're just going to see someone looking back at them like near you, just a normal-looking human face. But he says, now I want you to pretend this. Behind the scenes, what people can't see when they just look and see the human face, is that here's what's really going on inside. Let's imagine that the gargoyle section over here is snapping and lunging over towards the human being, like almost biting him. And so he's freaked out and he's cowering in terror and fear away from them. But just as he's doing that, he's getting bit up and lunged at from the other direction by the lion too. So imagine, in other words, that behind the scenes, the human being within has been dominated and almost enslaved by these other parts of the soul. They're just dragging him along wherever they want to go. So that's what he says it kind of happens to you when you behave unjustly, even if nobody knows about it. The equivalent of nobody knowing about it is the feature of the example where when others look, they just see a human face. So to all appearances, this is just a human being doing fine. No one knows anything better, but what's going on inside is not good for them, because what's going on inside is that the parts of their soul are at war with each other. They're struggling for control. The lower parts are trying to overcome and dominate the human being, which actually should be making all the best decisions. So maybe I didn't make this exactly explicit, but let me make sure it's clear. The little gargoyles that are all like, feed me all the time, which part of the soul do you think they're supposed to stand for? They stand for one of the three parts of the human soul that we just mentioned. So I'm sure you could guess that all those little gargoyles constantly wanting to eat are supposed to be a symbol of which one? That's my question. What the gargoyles stand for or represent in the whole analogy here? Yes, the appetitive part, because they stand for appetites. They're always desiring more. They never get enough, constantly want to be fed. So they're like the appetitive part. And then the noble lion, that's so proud and is always willing to fight and stuff. This is like the spirited part of you. And then, of course, the human being, because a human is smarter than an animal or a bunch of gargoyles, this is supposed to be the rational part within you. So he says that when you do behave unjustly, thinking, hey, I'm going to get away with it, no one will know any better, you're actually causing the human being within you, which is the most godly and intelligent part of you, to be enslaved and dominated by these inferior parts of the soul. So in fact, you're doing badly inside, even if nobody knows about it. So there's a cost, and there's a heavy price to be paid for injustice. And it doesn't necessarily involve penalties coming from externally onto you, like from society or from members of society. It's a penalty that's happening inside, because it's the corruption of your own soul. And it is the mismanagement of your soul which is allowing the parts to fight all the time instead of to live in harmony and peacefully with each other. So he says, you're going to live a life of turmoil, internal conflict, and you're going to make yourself suffer if you behave unjustly, even if nobody in the whole world ever finds out about it. So don't think that there's anything to be gained by unjust behavior that doesn't get discovered by others. Because when you do that, you're hurting yourself, you're corrupting your soul. And it's actually very sad, because it's a personal harm that no one else could do to you except for yourself. Who can corrupt you? Nobody, really. It's you yourself that can do this by taking decisions that deviate from your own reason and from your own integrity. So you should safeguard the just constitution of your soul, and try with everything you can to make sure that you don't become corrupt or vicious or unjust. Because if you do, then you're going to have to live with this corrupted soul, and you'll be perpetually at war within all the time. I mean, think about people, let's say, who have overactive appetites that they cannot set aside with their better judgment. Take like a really heavy, hardcore drug addict. This person is going to be dragged along for the ride wherever their appetites take them, okay? And sometimes they may think, if I was really being smart about it, I would stop doing this. But I cannot control my desires. They've got the best of me. I just, I know it's not smart, but I'm compelled to do it because my appetites overpower me. And sometimes people get into a bunch of fights because they're always in a rage, because they can't just, calmly set aside their feelings of disrespect and resentment. So do you really want to be the kind of person who keeps on making bad decisions because everything you do is based on the passions of the moment or the appetites of the moment? If that's the case, you're going to set yourself up for a difficult and hard life where the reason within you has been subverted and dominated. And so he says there's nothing to gain. There's nothing to gain from unjust behavior, even when no one knows about it. So here's what he said on this. He says, I think someone said at some point that injustice profits a completely unjust person who is believed to be just. Isn't that true? Glaucon says certainly is. So he says, let's discuss this then, since we've now agreed on the power that injustice and justice have. Glaucon asks how. Socrates says, by fashioning an image of the soul in words, so that the person who says this will know what they're saying. What sort of image, Socrates? He says, well, one like those creatures that legends tell us used to come into being in ancient times, such as the chimera, Scylla, Cerberus, like a minotaur, like a multiform beast, or any of the other multitude of others in which many different kinds are said to grow together naturally into one. He says, yes, legends tell us of those. So he says, well, then fashion a single kind of multicolored beast with a ring of many heads, that it can grow and change at will, some from gentle, some from savage animals. Says that's work for a clever artist. However, since words are more flexible than wax, consider it done. Okay, then fashion one other kind, that of a lion, and another of a human being. But make the first much the largest, and the other second to it in size. And he says, okay, done. Now join the three of them into one, so that they somehow grow together naturally. Okay, done. He says, then fashion around them the image of one of them, that of the human being. So that anyone who sees only the outside covering and not what is inside will think that it's just a single creature, a human being. And so he says, all right, so if someone thinks that injustice benefits the human being and that doing just things does not bring an advantage, let's tell him that he is simply saying that it is beneficial for you first to feed the multiform beast and make it strong, and also the lion and all that pertains to him, and then to starve and weaken the human being within, so that he is dragged along wherever either of the other two leads. And third, to leave the parts to bite and kill one another, instead of making them used to each other and making them friendly. That's what someone who praises injustice is saying. But on the other hand, wouldn't somebody that praises justice and maintains that just things are profitable be saying that all our words and deeds should ensure that the human being within you has the most control, and that he should take care of the many-headed beast as a farmer does animals, feeding and domesticating the gentle ones and preventing the savage ones from growing, and that he should make the lion's nature his ally, care for the community of all the parts, and bring them up in a way that they will be friends with each other and with himself. So that is what someone that praises justice is saying. And I think this is one of the powerful quotes. He says, from every point of view then, every point of view, anybody that praises justice is speaking the truth, and anybody that praises injustice is speaking falsely. Whether you look at it from the point of view of pleasure, good reputation, or self-interest and advantage, a praiser of justice is telling the truth, and a person who condemns it has nothing good to say and does not know what they're talking about. So Socrates / Plato, they're making a bold claim here. They're saying, don't be misled by those that will tell you things like this. Just cheat, lie, steal, and try to get away with it. As long as you get away with it, you're good. You're better off. You know, that's how you should operate in life. What Plato says is that the people who tell you to do this don't have your best interests in mind, because what they're actually telling you to do is, hey, go out there and corrupt your soul, you know, disempower your reason, and empower your appetites and desires over your best human part. If you do this, you're inviting your own self-destruction, you're putting your soul at war with itself, and you're corrupting it. So to people who think that's actually in your interest or to your advantage, they couldn't be more wrong. So you have to turn away, he says, from this unwise, irrational, unjust way of thinking. And then finally, you know, here I'll read a little more, and then that'll close this discussion. He says, well, here I'll set up the example. One other way to think about what he's saying here, how injustice can't benefit you, he says, think about it like this. Suppose that someone told you, hey, I want you to give me, just give me one of your loved ones. Like it could be your son, your daughter, maybe your mom, dad, or a sibling. And here's what I'll give you in exchange. You give me this loved one who I can do whatever I want to. By the way, I'm going to torture them. I'm savage. I'm evil. So give me that person and I can do that. And if you do, I'll give you however much money you want. How much do you need? $1 trillion? I'll Venmo it to you today so we can get this done. You name the money. It's unlimited, infinite. I don't care. 5 trillion, 20 trillion, you know? And I just need that loved one of yours to torture and do whatever I want with for the rest of their life. So he says, would that profit you if you made this exchange? Now, obviously, in a superficial financial sense, you might say, oh, yeah, it's profit because it's a lot of money. But would it make you a better person in the deep, abiding human sense? You would not be better off. You would not profit no matter how much money you got. So if you agree with that it's not in your interest to take an unlimited amount of money in order to give over a loved one to an evil person, then how could you sell out the human part within you in exchange for what you think of as like golden gifts that satisfy either your appetites or your passions? It would be just as unwise and foolish. So he uses this as another window into why he thinks there's no advantage to be gained from unjust behavior. And here's what he said. He wrote, in light of this argument, can it profit anyone to acquire gold unjustly if by doing so he enslaves the best part of himself to the most vicious? If you got gold by enslaving your son or daughter to savage and evil people, it would not profit you, no matter how much gold you got. How then can you fail to be wretched if you pitilessly enslave the most divine part of yourself to the most godless and polluted one and accept golden gifts in return for a more terrible destruction? So that's the way he ends that discussion. There's one point of view on what makes a human life go well coming from ancient Greece. Now, I did say that I wanted to try and at least gesture towards another viewpoint, and we're running low on time, obviously, but I can at least say a few words about it, and that's the work of Jean-Paul Sartre. So this is a French philosopher of the 20th century. This is taking us much closer to the modern day. He lived from 1905 until 1980, and he's the guy who's behind a major school of thought in philosophy called existentialism. Existentialism offers a way different viewpoint about what would make a human life go well, and it's much more individualistic. As you noticed just now, Plato, Socrates, they say we should all strive to empower our reason and allow it to preside over the lower parts of the soul. So it's kind of a one-size-fits-all conception. We should all be trying to do that, he says. For Sartre, anyway, it's not so much universal. He thinks there's a lot more subjectivity to the question of what makes a human life go well. And the reason for that is because existentialism is all based on this core principle. So the core claim of existentialism is that existence precedes essence. Okay? That's the main motto of existentialist thought. Existence precedes essence. To precede something is to come before it in time. Like 2020 preceded 2021. And the Trump administration preceded the Biden administration. So coming before is to precede. Therefore, what this means is existence is first before essence. Now, what's the essence of something? The essence of a thing is just its necessary defining attributes, okay? The essential features it has to have. So like if I was talking about a square from geometry, the essence of the square is 4 sides, equal length, with the inside angles each being 90 degrees. Those are essential features of squares. They're not optional. Those are required parts of it. That's why it's the essence of it. If I say the color blue, that's not essential to a square. A square could be blue, red, any color. So that's optional, but it's not optional for it to have 4 sides or for the sides to be of equal length, like I mentioned, okay? So in essence, anyway, is the essential features of a thing. What this says is that when it's a human being, we start off our life and we just exist, but we don't have an essence yet. So a baby that's born today is just a blank slate. But an essence for this person will develop later over time. Now, the essence of a person is not like in geometry, like I said, the number of sides of a figure, but instead, it's a little more interesting. It's the sort of cluster of attributes that you would say about yourself to give a sense of who you are and what your identity is as a unique individual. Like if it was me and I was telling people what my essence is, like what I'm all about, I would say, okay, I'm Richard Vulich, and some of the basic facts about me are that I'm a professor of philosophy, so I'm an academic. I love music, and so I try to be a creative person. I try to stay fit, and I'm an avid runner. I could talk about my political views, my religious views. I could talk about my taste in fashion, music, film, art, right? And by the time I was done with all of that, you'd get a sense of who I am. And each one of us has our own specific, identifiable features in terms of what our essence is. So the claim is that when you're born, you're just an open book and there's no essence. A baby born today is not like yet a liberal, a conservative, a Christian, an atheist, a fan of rap music or rock music or whatever genre. This is something that doesn't yet have any fact about it, but over time that essence will establish. Now, if the essence is not there on day one, but it appears over time, where do you think it will come from? Some of you probably think it comes from your environment, or it comes from your genetics, or it comes from your, external sources, the way you were raised. Well, here's something about existentialism that disagrees with that. Sartre and the existentialists say that you are the one that creates your own essence, and nobody else does. So it's all on you. The reason that you're like the way you are, if you ever wonder this, it's not because of the way your parents raised you. It's not because of the place you grew up, or the time period that you grew up, or the culture that you grew up in. Instead, it's just all about your free will and your choices. So like the liberal chooses to be a liberal, the conservative chooses to be a conservative, the religious person chooses that. Now you might think, my parents raised me to have certain values, and so talk to them about why I am this way. But the existentialists would say no. They would say that's bad faith. Bad faith is a term they use to refer to any time that you try to place responsibility for your essence on external factors that you could not control. And they say, no, it's not really the case that it's because of the way your parents raised you, because you have free will still. Some people, they see their parents being, let's say, religious, and they say, I want to follow in the footsteps of my parents, so I'm going to be like them. Other people make a different free decision and say, you know what, I reject the way my parents live, and I want to be different from them. Now, which kind of person are you? I don't know, but you're free, and so you get to make your own decisions. Even if it was believing in God, for example, no one can make you believe in God. It's up to you. I can't walk up to someone and be on the street and be like, hey, buddy, let me tell you, you believe in God now. You're welcome. I just helped you out. They have to make the decision on their own whether they do or not. And so it's all your freedom. Existentialism assumes that we have freedom and we create our own essence. So let me end with this. In existentialist thought, then, the best life, your best life, is just whatever life you're already living. Because he says when you create your own essence, you're creating a paradigm for all of humanity. When you make the person that you are, and you have total control over that, that reflects your own values. So like say if you get married or something, that means that when other people get married, you approve of that decision because it's in line with your own decision. As my own example, I'm a philosophy professor. So when students come up to me and say, I'm really getting interested in philosophy and I'm thinking of taking it as a minor or a major, I'm not going to tell them, come on, rethink it. That's not a good idea, because that's the same decision that I made. So the decisions that I've made reflect the things that I think are good to do. If people hold the same religious views as you, I'm sure you don't disagree with them. If people have the same political views as you, by definition, you agree with them because those are your views as well. So then that means that on existentialism, each one of us is creating a vision of the best life. And so in a way, it's kind of neat. You're already living your best life now because your free choices have led you to this point. If you didn't think, for example, it was a good idea to go to college, then that's not what you would be doing, but you are. And so the best way that you think you can live is reflected in your own choices. And the only thing that can be said then is that each person advances an example of their best life according to the example they show forth with the essence that they are creating. But no other force outside of you creates it except for you. So that means that you just kind of have to own it and take full responsibility for it. So if you like the way you are, you get all the credit. And if there's something that you don't like about yourself, then you can't really blame anybody else because the existentialist says you have all the freedom to make your essence, so you have to take full responsibility for it too. Okay, guys, so that's really everything I had for us from the authors for today. And that means we'll be done with the book and everything in there. And now we're just going to have review sessions next week. So like I say, I'm going to send the study guide later today. You can get ready to start looking at the questions, and then we'll cover them in as much detail as we can next week during the 2 meetings. Don't forget also your second paper is due next week, and you should be able to turn that in to me on Tuesday before class time. Okay then, so let me just make sure we're good. If you say so and everything's fine, then I'll close the stream and you can have a good weekend, and email me if you need anything in between now and then. So thanks, Melanie, and thanks everybody that's here, hanging in there through a tough, long semester, but here we are almost to the summer, so it's a nice time of the year. Okay, guys, then I'll see you next time. Enjoy, and if you need anything, be in touch. Okay, bye-bye.